Should I do it again? Welcome to the Laramie City Council work session for Tuesday, March 11, 2025. And we will begin the session by asking if there are any public comment, and seeing no one in the audience, we will move on to begin our work session. Our first work session, low-income municipal services rate ordinance, and Director Wade, welcome.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. You may recall that at your second regular meeting in January, you were being asked to consider the third reading of changes to our low-income municipal services rate ordinance. At that time, you motioned to postpone that third reading pending this work session so that you could learn more about this ordinance and kind of the history behind staff's recommendations and some of the conversations that we had had with one of your fellow council members on how this ordinance might be changed. And so I'm going to take you through that process, talk to you a little bit about the research that we did, and then at the end I'm going to ask you to provide direction to staff on how you'd like to see the third reading of that ordinance. If the changes that you have are substantial, you will see the ordinance on your agenda the next regular meeting because you postponed to a certain date. But what we would do is we would motion to postpone one more time so that staff could have time to make any substantial changes that you might recommend this evening and bring that to you at a later time. And so regardless of the way that you choose to head, I think we've got a plan. So what I would like to offer is this. At any point, I will during the presentation stop and ask if there are any questions. But if I haven't stopped yet and you have a burning question, I'm happy to entertain it if that's acceptable to the mayor, just to make sure that by the time you get to the end of the conversation and the presentation today that you do feel that you can contribute since we are asking you for that direction on the spot. Okay, with that, I will dive into the presentation. So City Clerk, if you could go to the first slide, which just shows our agenda. What I'd like to do is give you an overview of the original ordinance so you know the scope of what we are talking about this evening. We will review with you our initial staff recommendation, how we came to that recommendation, and then I'll talk to you about some of the key questions we got from one of your fellow council members. We'll spend a little bit of time exploring Wyoming LEAP and income guidelines for that program. It's low income energy assistance. We'll talk about some potential proposed amendments to the ordinance, and then we'll wrap up with that discussion. So that's what our evening looks like together. City Clerk, if you could go to the next slide. So the original ordinance, it was adopted in February 2013. There have been no updates since the time of adoption. And the reason we're looking at this ordinance is because our previous council, when they were adopting the surface water drainage fee, asked us to bring back a credit for that fee to this ordinance. The previous council did not ask us to take a look at the entire ordinance, but because we were going to look at the fee anyway, the city manager pulled us together and said, hey, let's go ahead and look at this whole thing and see if it needs updates. And, you know, since it hadn't been updated since February 2013, we thought that was a good idea. Some of the key provisions of this ordinance include a $37.58 credit per month. Enrollment in some kind of federal program is required. We're fairly flexible about that, so it doesn't have to be just programs that are, say, 130% of poverty or some really no number, but you have to enroll in a federal program. Only owners are eligible for this credit, which of course matches our billing. You have to reapply annually. That's really important because you can have a change in financial circumstances and become ineligible or eligible for the credit. And owners must reside at the location for 9 months of the year. Councilmember Newman asked a question during one of the initial readings of the proposed changes, and this 9 months actually came from recognition that we have a lot of snowbirds in town, what we'll colloquially call snowbirds who do exit. So important for you to know. I think I've covered most of the changes on this slide, except that we did present the first reading of the changed ordinance in December 2024. We wanted to make sure that the outgoing council had just a moment to take a look at that, since they were the group that actually directed staff to add that surface water drainage fee credit to begin with. But it was not the intention that the former council be the one voting on the changes to this ordinance. And so it was unique in that it spanned the two councils, and I think that's one of the reasons why this work session is a very good idea this evening. Next slide. So the initial staff recommendation, when you're taking an ordinance that hasn't been updated for a decade, you have to decide where to start. And what we decided at that time was, okay, well, we're going to say that the council doesn't want to change many of the policy objectives here, but maybe from the financial standpoint, this 3758, they might want to inflate that original number. Assume everything else held constant, and let's use the CPI to inflate that number. So we inflated that number and compared it to a percent of the current value of the average household bill, and found that it would have equaled about 44%. And so we said, okay, if we have about a 44% credit as inflated, what we could propose to the council is a 44% credit of what we expect the average surface water drainage fee to be. And then taking that dollar as the primary change we wanted to make in this policy. So basically saying, okay, we're going to experience similar usage. It's not going to be terribly financially impactful. We maybe want to do more marketing. That's good practice. But we're not going to expect utilization to go through the roof, right? So we can make some of these changes. We also wanted to recommend that the council consider automatic adjustment of these fees based on the average household bill. So the fee would, the credit would be indexed at 44% of the average household bill and reset annually, and that would happen automatically. And so in years where that average household bill is going up, the dollar amount of that credit is higher. In years where the average household bill is going down, the dollar amount of that credit is lower, and it would go either way potentially. And so that summary is a great synopsis of what actually was being considered in staff's recommendation to you. But remember, we made the assumption that there were no major changes in policy or program enrollment that were going to be considered here, that maybe it was just more of a financial matter. Next slide, please. So as we got into second reading, into third reading, Vice Mayor Richardson reached out to staff, and she started asking some great questions about current program utilization, which is very low. Billy, our customer operations supervisor, is here with me. Can you remind me of the number of households? 13 households are enrolled in this program. And so even if we double that or triple it, it's still a pretty low financial impact. And so Vice Mayor Richardson was really talking about ideas to expand program access. But once you start talking about expanding program access, then you also have to consider how to limit material impacts to revenue. And that doesn't mean all impacts to revenue. That means material impacts to revenue that end up being basically shifted on to other ratepayers and end up compromising your 10-year financial plans in the long run, and are basically just raising your rates. And so those are the things that we were kind of talking about between that second and third reading. Director Webb and I evaluated a handful of comparable credits. What I will tell you from that review is that some of them use low-income energy assistance program guidelines rather than simple federal enrollment. And so Councilmember Richardson had asked about using maybe to get rid of the federal program enrollment requirement, make it simpler, have staff verify income. We did actually find examples of other municipalities who use that approach. We also found plenty of programs that were not like our credit at all. And by that I mean many programs were only available for emergency circumstances, or they were administered by states or not-for-profits. And so finding comparable municipal credits, so meaning administered by a municipality, was not the easiest thing to do. Again, many of these things are more emergency utility bill assistance. The only municipality I found that did both, I think, was Fort Collins. It's possible Thornton, Colorado also did both, but many do not offer both emergency assistance and a credit on the bill. What we also found is that most of the comparable credits were lower than staff's initial recommendation of 44%, which makes sense because you're having a broader enrollment. And so you maybe want to limit your impact to revenue just a little bit. Now, when I talk about that 44% credit, just in terms of dollars and cents, I want you guys to know that's a monthly credit of $55.91 and an annual credit of $670.92. I also wanted to call out for you 3 of the most comparable credit programs we found, although they're not one-to-one comparable. In Sheridan, Wyoming, if you are 65 or older, or if you have a disability and you're accepted into Wyoming's LEAP program, you get a 50% credit. So Sheridan's was a little bit unique in the way that it used mainly age or disability as entry point into the program, not income at all. Income only came in when there was a disability present. In Thornton, Colorado, which has actually very similar rates to Laramie, there's a $535 credit per year. You do have to be low income energy assistance program approved. You can do that through federal enrollment, or you can just meet the income guidelines. And so that would be a little bit more consistent with what Vice Mayor Richardson was kind of trying to get at is, okay, can we just let people enroll based on income? Thornton does allow that. They also do allow if you're enrolled in a federal program just to show that. And in Fort Collins, they offer 25% off components of utility services based on the LEAP guidelines. And so a broad diversity here of kind of quasi-comparable. I could not find any in Nebraska. I looked. Could not find any in South Dakota. I looked. The programs I found there were state administered or more like just emergency focused. And so this was the best comparatives that I could give you. Next slide. Let's talk a little bit about Wyoming LEAP, just for those of you who may not be familiar. It's funded by federal assistance, and awards are limited by the amount of federal funding available. So applying for this program and being accepted to it is really contingent on the availability of funds. It's for utility assistance for heating, so it's not for water and wastewater bills. And the income guidelines are 60% of the state median income based on your household size. And I have found that that's pretty consistent between the LEAP programs across the states. I'm going to present that to you next, but that is not the only way that states administer these programs. And finally, I'd like to note to you that awards per households vary based on heating cost and income. And this program also gives priority to certain groups. So if you're older, if you have young children at home, or there's maybe a person who has a disability in the house, all of those factors would go into play when they're considering, I believe, the LEAP applications. And if any of you know more about this program than I do, it's totally fine with me if you speak up and add to that, because these are things, of course, I'm learning about too as I go. But I just presented a little graphic for you and the public from LEAP's website to kind of show you a little bit more about what types of assistance this program provides. City Clerk, next slide. I also have presented a graphic for you of Wyoming LEAP income guidelines, because you may think, well, what is 60% of the state median? What does that actually look like in terms of if we were to expand our program enrollment? What's the income based on household size that would be eligible for a city credit if we use this model? Well, for one person, you can see that that's an income of $34,861 per year. For 4 people, it's a median income of $67,041 a year. So that's about what we're looking at. What I also want to note for you, a couple of comparables by state, since these are federally funded programs, each state kind of has a version of them. Colorado LEAP is also 60% of the state median income. Nebraska LEHEP is gross income at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. Montana LEAP is 60% of the state median income. So in some of our neighboring states, I couldn't actually find South Dakota's. I found the program, but it was not transparent what their income requirements were. And so these are your best neighboring state comparisons that I can find. Next slide. This would actually be a really good time for me to pause. and ask if you have any questions about the information I presented before we talk a little bit more about some of the amendments that I think the Vice Mayor was mulling over.
Thank you, Director Wade. Vice Mayor.
I'm just curious if you'd be okay with me providing a little bit additional information on the federal poverty level versus LEAP. And it's not a question. Is that okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. One of the reasons that I went to Director Wade with this is because utilizing federal poverty level and some of the things like SNAP and food stamp, which is food stamps, other assistance programs that the state has, we know that Wyomingites do not have the lowest uptake of those programs of anywhere in the nation. And there are a couple of different reasons for that. One of them, the application process is incredibly cumbersome. They are working on making that digital, but it is not digital right now. So that's one reason why we don't have high uptake. And then I think we will be doing some research on this at the Community Foundation, but another part of it is kind of the stigma around accepting poverty or federal poverty assistance. And so from my perspective, that low number of only the 13, I think you said, is likely part of the reason why that is so low. So I just wanted to add that information.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Other questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none, Director Wade, please. Oh, Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Jen. Just for reference, is it included in here what the federal poverty level is at currently?
Councilmember Bowling, it is not included here, but I would be happy to, if you'd like for me to do a quick Google search and provide that just verbally to you all so that you could consider, I'd be happy to do that.
Or we could have someone do it while you continue.
Yeah. So if any of you wants to do that, that's great, and we can talk about that a little later.
So continue, please.
I do want to make note that the city's current ordinance does allow like if someone is enrolled in Wyoming LEAP, even though the income guidelines are not federal poverty level based or statewide median income, we do accept that. But like I said to you before, the funding for that program is limited. Certain groups have priority. And so there's still going to be some filtering in terms of that program enrollment that I think it's important for the council to know about if you are considering a policy decision about program access, which I think is, where some of the conversation will go. Yes.
If I could, Councilor Bolt, sorry, Mayor, what was your question exactly? I'm Googling for you.
Thank you, Janine. I was asking, based on the numbers that were provided of the 60% of the state median income, looking at the Nebraska example, like what a one-person or four-person or five-person household at the federal poverty level would be, if we're just using a comparison for a system.
So if you could go to the slide, just if you could display on the screen the slide that shows the income guidelines, just that might make the city manager's answers make sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. I can send you this link, councilors, but I just pulled it up off Wyoming
I didn't mean
Department of
to
Health.
derail us. I apologize.
No, I think it's an important question because it will give you perspective, right, on some of these numbers. So this is, I'll send you the link. It's from Wyoming Department of Health. These are income guidelines based on the federal determined numbers. So family size of one, 133% of the poverty level is $20,000. Family size of two, 133% of the poverty level is $27,185, and for a family of four, 133% of the poverty level would be $41,496. And I'll send you the link so you can look at them as Jen talks. Thank you.
And I'm glad that question came up because it actually was part of the conversation between myself and Director Webb and the city manager and Vice Mayor Richardson as we kind of teased out, what this potentially could look like to help the council. And so city manager, I think if you'll, I'm sorry, city clerk, if you'll go to the slide of potential amendments. And so I believe, and where staff landed in conversations with Vice Mayor Richardson is summarized in this slide. And when I say landed, what I mean is we felt that this position would have achieved the objectives that she was stating she was trying to achieve while limiting kind of material revenue impacts to the funds. And so the first objective stated was to expand the program access. And so we thought we could remove the requirement for enrolling in another program entirely. Homeowners can come to us and say, we just want to enroll in this credit program, and they don't have to enroll in anything else. We could use gross income as the only program qualifier and base that on Wyoming LEAP guidelines, which is that 60% of the state median. Again, remember that 3 of the comparator states went with that number, so that felt defensible. And based on household size, and then that staff would validate that income using the most recent tax return or other documentation if that tax return was unavailable. We're going to have to be able to validate that gross income number somehow. And so if a homeowner is not able to provide that tax return documentation, the ordinance would be written in such a way that staff can accept an appropriate substitute for that, as long as whatever that substitute is represents the entire household income. And so we're hoping, because that really is the only way to see what that is if they haven't enrolled in another program. So we need to do a little bit of that verification ourselves. I did talk to the city attorney about that to make sure that there were no problems there. He did confirm that that was absolutely okay. We had some good conversations there, and so I feel comfortable. We'll certainly not be retaining those tax returns. We will just be validating, we'll be marking that we validated, and then that information will go home with the homeowner. The second objective would be to limit the material impacts to income. So initially, we considered an option where, and you'll see this on the next slide because I wanted it there for you to see, where we left the original credit at the 44%, and the possible revenue impact was, in my opinion, as the finance director, unacceptable for the fund, in that it was very much material. And so if we retain the monthly credit of $37.58, which is about 32% of the average bill, we add the new surface water drainage credit to it based on that percentage at $320 a month, our credit would actually be pretty comparable to Thornton's, who has similar rates. And based on county data for property tax refund programs, we were able to estimate that for sure probably 86 households would likely apply. We would do some cross-advertising probably of the credit, costing $42,000 across all funds. Now, I want to tell you that what we're using to estimate revenue impact are people who have signed up for the property tax refund program. It is always possible that more people would sign up for this credit. Unfortunately, there is no good data out there on income and home ownership in Albany County. And so we have to be willing to at least double enrollment in our minds and say, okay, would we be willing to accept a rate impact if it was double this $42,000? And we felt like even if doubled at an $86,000 rate impact across all funds, that means it's split between surface water drainage, water, wastewater, and solid waste, that would be a manageable rate impact for the other ratepayers. And so we did some forecasting there, got some real data to come up with that number. Staff would recommend to you, if you go this path, because you're broadening program enrollment and there are going to be some unknowns. Of course, we could be triple the enrollment. I highly doubt that, but it's possible. We certainly don't want to allow for an automatic adjustment of this credit. We want to be able to monitor the new program, see how it's doing, and then come to the council at a future date, or you can request that we come to you at a future date with updates to the ordinance after we have some new data on program usage. And so this is kind of where we landed as a middle ground to achieve expanded program access and limiting material impacts to income. So the next slide. Now it's time for basically your discussion this evening, and I prepared a slide to kind of help you through this. This final slide really just proposes to you the things that staff and one of your fellow council members have already talked about. We talked about, of course, you all know we talked about the initial recommendation. Downside there, I think Councilmember Newman asked us to present pluses and minuses, and so the plus of this is that it would increase the existing credit. The downside is it's got low enrollment, and I'm not sure even with marketing if we can expect that enrollment to increase greatly, and so there's a limited reach of this credit, even though it's a very generous one. The second solution is what we actually looked at first with your fellow council member and vice mayor. We looked at broadening the enrollment to be 145% of the median income in Albany County. That had a material revenue impact at $180,000 per year across all funds at the minimum enrollment of 86 households. So if we double that, it's $320,000 or $360,000 across all funds, which, so when I said earlier, it's not an acceptable revenue impact, that's what I mean. It was very far over the line of what I think the rest of the ratepayers would consider to be palatable. And from a financial planning standpoint, I would advise against that. The third option was to broaden program enrollment to that 60% of the state median income. That's the Wyoming LEAP. That was based on our research into other comparable programs to get rid of basically the requirement of our existing ordinance that you have to be enrolled in another program. Staff can verify that, but we would keep the existing rate, the $37.58 credit, and add the $3.20 credit for the storm drainage, which would mean that the annual average benefit to a household of this credit would be $489.36. And again, the estimated revenue impact at 86 households is about $45,000 a year. Double that, that rounds up to 90. And so that was what we came to as, okay, that feels acceptable. And using these options and other things you may come up with, it's now for you to provide some direction to staff on what you really want to see in the third reading of this ordinance. And so I'm going to take some notes actually as you guys are talking, but we will need direction for what we do next.
Council members? Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director Wade. This is awesome. And maybe just a refresher question for you, to council and the folks watching. There's 12 households using one of these programs or this program. Can you just speak to, and maybe we've talked about this before, so I apologize, but to why you think there's enrollment challenges in the current system? Or if that is a robust, return for folks that do it, why are we seeing such a small trend of households using it or utilizing that? I guess just for my knowledge.
Honorable Mayor, through you, Councilmember Freed, I don't know if I can answer that question because we haven't surveyed the community. We haven't done any actual research. Anecdotally, I think Vice Mayor has proposed some ideas as to why that might be, with federal program enrollment being a barrier, but that's honestly speculation. We haven't done aggressive marketing for this credit in quite some time. So it's possible that just simply some additional marketing could get these numbers up in terms of their impact, but we don't know that for certain.
Thank you, Director Wade.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade. Staff may be able to answer this question, but I would also just pose it as something that the council can think about. If we feel like enrollment in a federal program is a barrier, which I think data from the Community Foundation can support, is there a reason to think that eliminating that, but verification through another means is going to be any less of a barrier, or is going to be more attractive to people? So that's just something that I'm curious about.
Director Wade.
Honorable Mayor, I think I can speak to that, Councilmember Bowling. I think we can use the data set from Albany County as indicative because there's definitely an income verification process that they have to go through for the property tax refund program.
That answers my question.
Councilors?
Councilor
City Clerk.
Lockhart has his hand.
Oh, good. Can you please let him in, or? Thank you, City Clerk.
Hi, team. Can you hear me?
Okay, Counselor
all right.
Lockhart.
Yes, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can hear me?
We need the volume up just a little bit more, I think.
Okay. I'm at 100% max.
No, City Clerk is taking care of that.
Oh, okay.
Counselor.
I'm sorry. Okay.
All right, we can
All
hear
right.
you now.
Well, thank
Please
you.
proceed.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Wade. This question kind of goes along with the email we received the other day from a constituent with 45% of the homes or residentials in Laramie being rentals, where many times your city utility bill is included in your rent. But if it's not, have we, has staff taken into consideration, it's not the primary residence of the owner of the home, but it is a rental. So has that been thought about where this person or family that's renting the home or apartment or whatnot, has to pay the same amount as someone that maybe is not in college, gainfully employed or whatnot? What are some considerations or thought process involving that if they're responsible for the utilities in the residence that they do rent, but are at a qualifying income amount, so to speak? If
Director
that makes
Wade.
sense.
Honorable Mayor, through you, Councilmember Lockhart, thank you for that question. And my team and I actually talked about that a fair amount prior to bringing council the first reading of the ordinance. As you may know, we do bill city utility services only to owners. And so it is the owner's liability to pay that bill. And so from our perspective, this credit can only be available to owners because they are the folks who have the city utility service. And that isn't to say, Councilmember Lockhart, that I don't hear very much what you're saying. That's why staff and I talked about it. But we don't really see a way around that administratively. And I mean administratively in the best possible way, because if a credit is only, if a bill is only owned by the owner of the property, then how can that tenant have access to the credit for that bill?
I agree. It seems quite complex
Yeah.
to find a workaround. I'm just glad that there was a thought process put into that, since we are heavy on rentals
Yes.
in this community. Thank you for your answer.
Other questions or comments? Counselor Newman.
When we talk about stuff like this is when I hate becoming a counselor, because especially when it comes to like budget items like this, to where, I would really like to do like the middle one. However, we don't have the money to do that anymore, right? I was raised poor. My parents took full advantage of items like this. And it wasn't until I became successful in my career that I realized like how much it does help families. And obviously I'm not from Wyoming, but just looking back at Kansas, I know this would help people. If I had to pick the three out of this, coming from the finance part of it, it would have to be the third one, for it to make sense for me to do more, to help more people, but make sure that as a city, we're still financially able to do it as well. And so that's where I would come from. I do appreciate all the work that Vice Mayor has put into it and city staff has put into this, because I know it wasn't easy, and I'm sure after this last session over the hill, it was even worse. So thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
We're going to go to Counselor V. Hill.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Wade. That was super, your presentations are always like, just awesome. So you kind of talked a little bit about, right, like the revenue impact if enrollment like doubled. What would a scenario look like? I mean, is there a cutoff? What if it's, for some reason, what if the enrollment like tripled? What would that look like? And how would you feel about that from the finance perspective?
Honorable Mayor,
Director
through
Wade.
you to Councilmember Vigil, that is on my mind. Of course it's on my mind because of the work that I do. And so at that point, so if we were to see triple enrollment, we're at $150,000 across all funds at triple enrollment, not the base level of enrollment at option 2. I would tell you at that time, Council, you would have a decision to make about what you want to do with this credit. If it's something that you wish to continue, then we would simply be planning for that when we are adopting, of course, our water, wastewater, solid waste, mosquito control, surface water drainage rates, and we would be accommodating that. So I know that that's not intentionally vague, but that is actually the real answer, is you would have a decision to make. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Wade, again. This is, I think, similar to what our Councilor Newman said. It feels like the intention of this is to do the most good for the people with the least, and yet there are barriers that we cannot work around. The rental one is a point well taken, and yet I can't understand how we would put a system in place that would be able to solve that problem. And so I feel like it's our job of these three to try and do the most good for the most people while also doing the least amount of harm. And that, to me, I think is evident in broadening the enrollment to 60% state median income, the third option. So,
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Doherty.
I also like the third option, but when we were talking about recycling and adding glass recycling, I know that the Wyoming Conservation Corps, when they did glass recycling, people would pitch in, and according to Mayor Harrington, they could cover the cost. And but my understanding at that time is that we wouldn't have a good way for people to just be able to add another dollar or something like an optional, like I'd throw in some extra money, and maybe that could cover if suddenly too many people needed to use this. Is our new software, is that something that we can dream about in the future, that might be a possibility, or is it just doesn't work with cities to have optional extra payments?
Honorable Mayor, through you, Councilmember O'Doherty, I think that approach is really more consistent with an emergency aid type program, not an ongoing commitment like this program. And so I think that, I could see a world, and we've done this before, certainly during the pandemic. We accepted donations, and those donations are amazing, but they have to be ongoing to offset the impact of a program like this, which is an ongoing program. And that wouldn't really be, in my opinion, a sustainable model for funding this credit in the options that are envisioned here, unless the council members decide that you don't like any of these and you want to kind of start over, and a different program maybe is better for the community. But emergency aid, I think, is a definite place for that, maybe.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is for you, Vice Mayor, so maybe you were going to jump in, but I really like the third option that the city's presented and really appreciate the differences in these and the information behind it. I feel like there's it's been a very thoughtful process, and how can we potentially up enrollment and make people aware of the systems that could benefit them in this community, and also maintaining a budget that can keep our city going. So I don't know, Vice Mayor, I just give it to you and see, you've done, I think, a ton of work in this, so thank you so much, and what your thoughts would be.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to be very clear that I have not done that much work in this. I have thrown out an idea and concerns, and I think that's what's really incredible about the staff, is that I said, this is a concern I have. Can you help me figure out how to do this? And they dove in and then came back and presented ideas. So I want to give huge kudos to staff. And I also agree with the third. As much as I would love to be doling out all that money to support our low-income folks and provide rental support and all of that good stuff, the thing that makes most sense and that makes us, we have a responsibility to be fiscally responsible with our city's money, and I agree that the third option, in my opinion, is a good one as well.
Councilor Newman.
I wanted to hit on.
Councilor Newman.
I wanted to hit on two things that you guys, that council has brought up. One of them is, I think, the third option, I'm not changing my mind, but the third option, like if we had to have that hard conversation of, do we have to get rid of it? I think that would be an easier conversation. And I think it's one that we could probably find the funds to where we wouldn't have to get rid of it, because I would hate to implement something and then, just kidding, we can't afford that anymore. So, and then the rental thing, and I had a conversation with the constituent that sent us an email, and adding the rental, something in the language that if it's a rental, like they can apply for it too, I think is a sticky situation, because the constituent said, well, we would pass that savings on to the landlord. Well, the funny thing about that is you can't prove that. And not only that, we see landlords who aren't even following our rental ordinance. So I would have a really hard time of putting something in there to where, they could apply for this, but there's no proof stating that, that savings will really go to the residents at that place. So, but those were just a couple things I wanted to put on the record, because I did have conversations about them.
Thank you. And Director Wade, I want to thank you and your department for your work with this, your careful consideration, and as Councilor Vigil said, always your excellent presentation. You make those things hard that I have a hard time understanding understandable. I wanted to comment that I do appreciate your consideration of customer privacy in not retaining records that are needed for validation, that there's a check you validated and the record goes back with the person. I think that's very thoughtful, and I also like the fact that we don't have to worry about protecting people's private information. Regarding donations, just a thought I had, and then the more I'm thinking it through, I think, well, maybe it's not reasonable, but we do have a high number of rentals in our town, a majority rental, and we do have a high level of people at the poverty rate who sometimes intermittently may need assistance. And I'm just wondering, with this idea of, do you wish to contribute? I would do that too, to $5 or something. And would it be possible for us to just start, don't work on this now, but to entertain that could be something we would allow people to do in order to contribute to an emergency fund where and possibly we somehow distribute that. Maybe it's managed by Interfaith or another, but that people in trouble for a month could get assistance. And it would not be part of the enterprise fund.
Yes.
But it would be an emergency fund when people need temporary assistance.
Honorable Mayor, I really appreciate those comments because my staff and I actually talked about that as well. It is my understanding that there is a program administered by Interfaith that does provide this kind of assistance to our renters. And so maybe what we could do as part of our advertising for this new credit is also do a little bit better job advertising where people can go if maybe they are a renter and they need some assistance with their utility bills. And also, you know, if people want to contribute to those efforts locally, maybe get them directed to organizations that already do that work rather than taking on an additional city service. Would that be an acceptable solution?
I think that sounds more manageable, and I don't think we need to take on more administrative duties. So, but for us to reach out to our community partners and to have as part of our outreach information that helps people to connect with these services and helps to guide people that these services exist and they can donate to them. I think that's an excellent idea.
Okay.
And a lot more logical than our taking it on. So I also will conclude with saying, though I'd love to do more, I think that I'd like to do something. And I think that choice 3 is reasonable at this point, and as we face significant budget cuts, and we'll need to see how all that plays out, that I think we need to be pragmatic in our approach and choose something that, as Councilor Newman said, we know we can support over time. So, thank you. Thank you very much. Do you think the direction that you need?
So, Honorable Mayor, hearing from the council that a majority are all who spoke, do you think that the third option is an acceptable revision to the ordinance? We will proceed with the third reading of this ordinance at your next regular meeting, so next Tuesday. We do have a version of this ordinance created. The city attorney has already looked at it as well. And so it is ready to go, and you will have that at your next meeting. And so thank you so much for the direction and the great conversation tonight and the thoughtful questions. We really appreciate it as staff.
Thank you, Director Wade. And now I'd like to turn this over to the public. Are there any public comments on this work session item?
Mayor.
I have a person in the audience. Oh, was there a comment from?
Oh, I was just going to let you know Brett Glass is online when you're ready.
Okay, I'll take the comment on the person here. If you can come to the podium and state your name for the record, sir.
I'm Gimpy. I'm pleased to meet you. After many years in the Army, I came back to school, 4 years electrical engineering, finished in '95, the year after the internet came out. In '95, I said that writing code for external 10K processors and MC11 chips and stuff, but not the internet. This is evil. But there are good applications to this phone. And I'm sorry, my name is Robert Frederick Gish, Bob Gish. And my phone told me today to come to my first city council meeting. Now, it also told me 6:30. So they're not quite where they need to be yet. And it's kind of funny because I came here just to listen, maybe become more civic oriented. And my concerns correlates to what you are, and that's why the Lord told me to come here today. And I'm sorry I was late for the first 30 minutes, but I think I got the gist of the meeting. We're supposed to be, out of the 444 municipalities in this country, we are one. And unfortunately, we have the university, so you're going to have that higher rental. The chains, and they have tons of money. So I wish I knew the peculiars of exactly what's going on here, and I read the 3 bullet points and the 3 choices, and it made sense. You got to pick a plan. I'm here to tell you today that there's always something better. And if I was an integral part and knew exactly what's going on to help these people that need help with their utility bills, is this basically what this is about? My gas bill was $179 this month. I'm disabled on more than one account. I'm living on a small federal pension and Social Security. I'm blessed because I got all these programs before what's happening with the grander view of what's happening in this world right now, which I could speak a dissertation on. But you all are educated people and you know what's happening. We know that we can't count on the federal government for a dime anymore, at least in the interim. And maybe by choice because, yes, the federal government's too big. But what's happening at the federal level is just, it's not right. You take a military command or anything, you don't go in and say about face and start running. You do changes slowly. If you're going to impact a person, if my policies are going to impact an auto manufacturer and 60,000 people, I better have plan B for those 60,000 people before I come off at the knees. I could only imagine after a 32-year federal employee that if I was way underneath the retirement age and I went to work one day and here in Laramie I had 4 horses, 7 dogs, 3 kids, and a wife. You have no job anymore. Okay? What would that do to my family? I came so close in 2018 to becoming homeless because of the bureaucracy. We need to think outside the box. If this is to help such a small percentage of people that need help paying their bills, there are people like I that are blessed. And I'm not blessed like so many people are in this community that have money, and that's what this country was found on. You can't tell me how much money I can make. But it's the point where if there's so many people and there is a 4th option, there is a 5th option. Proceed with your best point, whether it's A, B, or C, go forward, but you have a backup plan. Reach out to people like me. I could contribute $50 more a month for a year just to get a $10,000 fund. There's people out there that could contribute $1,000 a month if they wanted to, just for a backup, because it is important to help people that are struggling. I mean,
Thank you for your comments.
so
You're limited to 3 minutes right now.
I didn't. I foresee a council
But
meeting.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your support
Yeah.
of our working toward an emergency fund, and your comment that, there are many people at many different levels willing to contribute. Thank you
Right.
very much.
But again, you could probably, by reaching out to the public, being factual with this. Hey, we've got 0.5% of our population can't pay their power bills. This is all we need to keep them warm in the winter.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
that was just brainstorming, sitting into my first thing.
Good.
But there's options. There's other options besides A, B, C, and the D that I might have just presented, but you've probably already thought of. There are other things to do, but it is
Thank you.
important. But my main concern.
Okay, call to order. Thank you.
2 minutes.
Good comments. We will, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you. If we can bring Mr. Glass in. Good evening, Mr. Glass. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
All too well. Hold on, let us turn the volume down. Very
Oh,
good.
sorry. Okay.
No, it's not you. We had to turn it up for Councilor Lockhart.
Yes.
Proceed,
Okay.
please.
Okay, Honorable Mayor and members of council, I have got a few minutes before I have to be on a webcast, and I've been listening to all of this, and I wish I could have commented earlier. Very concerned about the way this is, about this proposal, specifically because of a similar problem that we're having on the state level. The stormwater fee, as they call it, is not really a fee, it's really a property tax. And just as the property tax relief on the state level is not taking renters into account. Here, this one seems to be headed in a direction where it won't either. And in fact, renters are much more economically disadvantaged than people who are homeowners, who could potentially borrow against their property, and who obviously already had enough money to buy a home in the first place. So you're missing the percentage of the population that needs it most. Now, I listened to Councilor Human's comment about, well, gee, you can't trust landlords to pass on a credit. Well, I think you can. You actually have a database now of a large percentage of the landlords in the city, so you actually could contact them and work through them. But if you still do not trust rental property owners, and some of you on council actually are rental property owners, then maybe what you can do is reach out to the tenants directly or through their landlords, but give them a credit directly. However, I think it's important to do that because, for heaven's sake, there's no point in doing this credit at all unless you can reach the people who really need it. So I hope you'll consider that. Anyway, I must get on my webcast, so I have to go, but I hope that you will seriously consider doing something that makes a difference for the people who need it the most. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. Okay. With no further comment, I'd like to move on to our second work session, which is the 5th Tuesday Town Hall meetings. And City Clerk, are you going to present this?
I'd be happy to, Mayor.
Thank you.
Now, Mayor and Council, we just prepared a few slides for you to start the conversation. With that, we'll do a short introduction of what Fifth Tuesday meetings have been, past approaches. Next steps would be your portion of that to determine through discussion what you would like the format of Fifth Tuesday meetings to look like if they were reinstituted. So we'll go ahead and get started. How often do Fifth Tuesdays occur? It's 4 times a year or once a quarter. So our next Fifth Tuesday would be in April of this year. So just to kind of put that on your radar. So a little bit of history here. We'll dive in. When did Fifth Tuesday ward meetings start? I was really hoping Councilor Shumway was here, but I forgot he's at NLC today. So as long as I've been with the City of Laramie, I feel like there have been Fifth Tuesday meetings until recently when it was determined that it needed a little bit of format change and stuff in order for them to continue. So I started back in 2016. City Manager, do you remember?
I think it's been about 10 years, 9-10 years. Don't quote me, but it's been a long time.
Why were they instituted to begin with? Why were they put on hold? They were put in place originally, I believe, to institute some communication channels for the public to be able to share with their counselors questions about things that you guys have addressed or concerns that they see. Things that we heard were like streets in West Laramie. That was a hot topic in Ward 1. Ward 2 had a few less people, but you did hear concerns here and at Fire Station 3. So we had 3 separate meetings for that, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the format. But they did put those on hold in a prior council because of the lack of participation. They were seeing a lot of the same people with a lot of the same questions or concerns being brought forward. There was at one point where they tried to do topics, and it just didn't feel like they were maybe getting the amount of participation and comments that they were hoping for through the format that was being used at the time. So they did ask to put those on hold. So what formats were used? Janine, correct me if there's any additional ones that I didn't think of. But like we discussed, there were 3 separate locations. So Fire Station 2 was one meeting location. City Hall was Ward 2. And Ward 1 has changed a little bit. They've had it at Fire Station 3. We've had it at the police department in their classroom due to changes and things like that. So 3 counselors were elected to represent each ward. So each of the counselors would go to their respective wards. 1 staff member would be present at each ward. And part of that was to go ahead and facilitate the opening and closing of the meeting location, and to answer any questions that the counselor or the community members had asked that the counselor maybe wasn't fully informed on. The staff member might have additional information they could offer. The other thing was they were responsible to report back to the city manager. So oftentimes Janine would send herself, Todd, and when Malia Brown was here, she was also one of the representatives that she sent. So she didn't just send anybody usually. It was someone that she trusted to give you good information, but also to be able to bring back good information in case there's something we needed to further address. So things that I would just encourage you to consider is the who, what, when, where, how, and why of why we would be holding these meetings. Part of that would help us to form a resolution to bring back to you for adoption, so that there's an actual adopted format for these 5th Tuesday meetings. Part of why I can't tell you when they started is it's hard to track that because there was nothing formally adopted. It was just kind of an agreement that the council had decided to do. So I think it would be good for research purposes, but also institutionally just to kind of say this is what we are deciding to do. So with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you and the council.
And just a point of order, would it be appropriate for me to make comments now, or shall I query council and then make my comments?
Mayor, since this was a council requested work session, I think it's totally appropriate for you to make comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that the COVID epidemic began to complicate having 5th Tuesday by having it online and Zoom and stuff like that, and it began to fade out. Then after COVID, when we reinstituted it, the numbers, if you had a big turnout, there were maybe 4 or 5 people. That was a big turnout, and it would be 1 or 2 people. So for each of those 3 ward meetings, you have 3 counselors and a staff that are preparing and in that, and waiting for 2 hours for the meeting, or waiting, usually you'd wait an hour and a half to 2 to see if anyone else was coming. And I found that, personally, I found that they were not productive. And then with looking at having a town meeting where all counselors would be present, and people come to a town meeting, I believe that we might increase participation. I think it would decrease the stress on staff to support these. But the one thing that we're going to have to consider, if we all come together in a town meeting, then it becomes an official meeting. So then the cost per meeting is going to be $1,500 for our official meeting. So then per year, for the 4 meetings, it would be a cost of $6,000. And that is statute for if we have official meeting. I could see that the meeting would be facilitated by another individual while we sit for questions and discussion. So that is my comments, and I see a hand raised and then a hand raised. I'll go to Counselor Newman. Questions or comments?
Being one of the counselors that recommended this work session, I have some comments. I don't have any questions. I would like to see a town hall set up to where we all meet together, and I know it adds costs, and I have a suggestion about that as well. I didn't like the topics when I was part of just the community coming in, because maybe I had a different concern and I was told, well, that's not a topic that we're talking about today, and I didn't like that. So I wouldn't want any topics. However, I would want to, and I'm gonna get hate mail for this. We need to limit the public comment, and what I mean by that is like 3 to 5 minutes. And then maybe a 5-minute to 10-minute council response. If not, we could have 30 people out there and one person takes up the entire time. So there has to be some justification of, we need more time, we need more time, right? But I don't want somebody who is mad at something we just voted about and just come up here and just waste our time, and then nobody else gets to talk. So there has to be some sort of time limit, and whatever that is. However, that I said 3 to 5 minutes because I think that would be plenty of time for the public to come and present something to us, and 5 to 10 minutes for us to respond, and or say that we'll make a work session on whatever the topic is, right? I think, and I'm just going to go down the list now real fast. Who? Obviously, Laramie. It has to be all the wards, right? And then what am I hoping for? My overall hope for this is public communication. Yeah, I get some emails every once in a while, and then we have people who will come up and give public comment, right? But we can't respond to the public comment according to our rules of procedure. So I think that communication would be valuable on some items that we deal with, right? And then I think here would make the logic sense to meet. We meet here anyways. I thought about maybe other places, and then one that just popped in my head. What if we traveled though? So like the first Tuesdays here, the second one's in West Laramie, the third one's in East Laramie, something like that, to where we're not always here to, some of the people in West Laramie who can't make it over here, well, they will have a fifth Tuesday. And I'm glad that just popped in my head because I think I like that a lot more. The why, obviously, why are we going to hold this? I just want open communication. And then the how, I think if we come up with, to be honest, I don't care who runs it, but you get 3 to 5 minutes in the council. As long as there's some sort of structure, I think it would work well. And I don't think anybody could run them. Maybe if we travel, and this is another one that just popped in my head, the Ward 2 or Ward 1 people run that meeting, and then we go over here, and then somebody else runs a different one, right? So we're all invested into these fifth Tuesdays. And then we can't hold council to this, but my idea for the pay is we pick a nonprofit for that one and we donate our money for that council to a nonprofit. So, hey, and I think that might bring in some engagement too. This fifth Tuesday, we are going to give our money to Interfaith, and then blah, blah. We can't hold council to that. However, I think that would be a good idea to bring in public engagement, because what we would do is we would call Interfaith and say, hey, this is our fifth Tuesday. We're going to donate some funds to you. Could you help get the word out that we're going to have a meeting as well? And we're going to build that community up, right? And I think that's what I would like to see for these town hall meetings. Is when I first went to one, there was 3 people out there, and I talked for 5 minutes, and then everybody was done. So I was just like, okay, what do I do for the next hour, right? So I think those are all ideas that I have to help make this fifth Tuesday a thing, and I would like to bring them back.
Thank you, Counselor Newman. And Counselor Bowling, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. If there's a procedural rule that prevents us from doing this, please enlighten me. I'm unaware of it, but why not, so it's been, in the past, it was quarterly and by ward. Why not 3 at-large meetings, each in a different ward with 1 representative from each ward? So the first meeting of the year is at the Civic Center, and Councilor Freed is there, and Councilor Doherty is there, and Councilor Richardson's there. And then the second quarterly meeting is held somewhere in Ward 2, and it's 3 different councilors. So we've got 3 at-large meetings. All 9 councilors participate over the course of that 3 at-large sessions, and then we have 1 final town hall in a large space with all 9 councilors.
Counselor Newman.
I'll just respond. The reason why we stopped doing the meetings is because that's kind of what we did. It was just individual meetings, right? We didn't do the town hall, but each 5th Tuesday was all the counselors for that ward. I do like the idea of mixing them up, but remember, like, I talked for 5 minutes, and then like other wards, they were there for an hour. So that's kind of why we got rid of what we were doing, just for clarification.
Thank you, Counselor. Vice Mayor.
Did you have more, Councilor? I have a question, perhaps for the city clerk. Does it have to be, or would it be called an official meeting if we were to meet in a large space, similar to how, if there's a public something, and we each kind of are in different areas, and the people come to us to discuss things? Would that still be considered a public meeting, or would it then be something else?
So if I'm understanding correctly, you'd be in 3 separate rooms?
Or maybe a large room, so maybe it's a Civic Center gym, and we just have tables spread, and rather than hosting one large town hall, people are able to come visit, and maybe it's mixing up the wards, or maybe it's keeping the wards together, but we have that centralized location. And the reason I mentioned this, I'm not opposed to a town hall. I think it could be great. I remember one of the meetings that we held for Ward 1, and we had actually a very good turnout. And the conversation was led more by the public, and there were a number of different kind of topics that were happening. And so I'm just curious, if it were something that was a little more loosey-goosey and public-led, would it still be considered a public meeting?
We could confirm with the city attorney on how he feels about it. I think we probably could reason that you're not all 9 meeting together at the same time to discuss the same topics. So we might be able to, it might not be called a public meeting at that point.
Thanks.
Can you bring in Counselor Lockhart? Thank you. Counselor Lockhart, proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm all for this. I think it'd be fantastic talking to many constituents or prospective constituents when I was running. They brought it up, called them town halls, what have you. I didn't get in this for the money anyway, so I'd be willing just to give up, donate my salary or my pay for it, or not take any at all. So that's my understanding. The ordinance says that we're going to have to be paid, but I don't need the money. As far as the agenda goes on the topics, that's where we would need a lot of thought process put in. I agree. It's like, what are we going to talk about? Because you don't want this to be a gripe session. We want it to be productive, and how long are they going to be run? I mean, are we going to have an hour meeting, a 2-hour meeting? Is there a time limit, much like we have right now with city council and whatnot? I think we need that. I like the idea that staff's going to be there because, as a new council person, as some of us are, we don't have all the answers. Heck, I'm trying to figure out things that were talked about last year. So if it's brought up, I'd like to have someone on city staff there to understand that. I like the idea that we're all together because I think we all feed upon each other. So I feed upon, or an idea will pop up because one of my fellow counselors brought up an idea. So those are just some of my feedback. I think it's a fantastic idea. The main goal is to get feedback, and we're transparent. I want to know what everybody's thinking. But I don't want it to be a gripe session, for the whole thing. That's why I like Counselor Newman's idea about a time limit per se. But I want people to be able to share their feelings. And also, I think, we set the agenda, instead of it being loosey-goosey, so to speak, you set the agenda so perhaps stakeholders for that topic can show up and talk. I mean, if this is a housing, we need the stakeholders, we need developers there, we need things like that, realtors there and whatnot. So just an idea there. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I'm pro this. I would prefer it to be everybody together. I like a couple ideas on how to handle that. But thank you, and I'd love to bring this back as soon as possible if we can get it worked out.
Thank you, Councilor Lockhart. City Clerk, you have a comment?
Mayor, I just wanted to let you know, based off from Councilor Lockhart's comments, that in the past, there was a time limit on the town hall or the ward meetings. They went from 6 to 7:30. So they did have it structured in an hour-and-a-half block.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Freed?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think I echo the sentiments of everyone here that this is a cool thing that can provide a voice and more engagement. To Councilor Newman's point, we can't respond to public comment, but I think this provides more of a communication that we can get real feedback and provide transparency to the general public. Thinking about this for a while now, my proposition would be there's some history here with these Fifth Tuesdays. They've worked, maybe they haven't worked, and if we're going to restart them, I think we shouldn't jump into being paid. My thought process is let's hold a town hall, or not a town hall, excuse me, a Fifth Tuesday meeting with 3 or 4 of us, not a quorum, and see who shows up and see what it is, and limit public comment to 5 minutes max, and we're there for an hour and a half. And if there's a ton of people and it's overwhelming, then we need to expand it. Or if we're getting a ton of turnout and it's relevant to have council members all present, then let's do it. But I think if we're hearing that certain wards or certain times that this wasn't, maybe as productive as it could have been, well, let's see. So my thought process is let's start small, and we can always step up and start with a very simple agenda where you have 5 minutes to talk about an item, and you can go back and forth. And if there's a question from a council member to a member of the public, give them a chance to respond, maybe for a minute or something. I think that would allow engagement and real feedback to happen, as opposed to one-sided conversations either from council or from the public. And I think, start in a central location. It could be here, it could be anywhere. We could do 4 of those meetings a year with 3 or 4 of us, and we could rotate. I don't have an idea of what I really think for that, but I think before we start thinking about getting paid, and I do like Councilmember Newman's idea of donating those funds, but why waste our time or the community's time or potentially community money if there's not going to be more than a few people talking to us? So that would be my perspective.
Thank you. And Councilor Newman?
To respond to that, I've thought about that too, like just having a couple of us, but I wouldn't want that ever to be thrown in our face, like, especially, and let's say I run again, right? And then they're like, well, you only went to one Fifth Tuesday, but Councilor Bowling went to 2. So like, I don't ever want like that tension, which is kind of what I was thinking about as well. I think if we do have the town hall and have an agenda, limiting the public comment, whatever, I wouldn't want topics though. And here's my reason why. We already have work sessions, right? So if we need a work session on housing, let's do a work session on housing. I don't want this to just turn into a work session. If we think, and I like this motion, and I know I can't make one tonight, but maybe we need to have public comment and then go back to the council during work sessions, because maybe they do bring up good topics when we have those work sessions. That spikes an idea in somebody's mind. So I think I might work with city staff about that. But was my, I had that wrote down, that why I didn't want to do that. I don't want to be targeted because maybe they were talking about something I've mentioned and I wasn't there, if that makes sense. So, but.
Thank you, Councilor Newman. And Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that the last time we talked about this, I said something about like foregoing pay and this is going to cost the city more. And I also want to make sure we're thinking about the other side of this. We are all doing the work and we should be paid for the work. Now, if we want to donate that, that's great, but I also think if there is ever someone on this council who depends on that money to pay for childcare, to get their gas to come, whatever that looks like, I want to make sure that we recognize the work and let people know if we do set up something like a donation, which I love, that we do that, but also be really respectful of people who that money might be really important for them to kind of be able to be here and serve the public.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the Vice Mayor just said exactly what I raised my hand to say. I think it's important to be acknowledged for that work. And again, like people have real childcare costs, et cetera. So I think a lot about that kind of thing. And then so I really like Councilor Newman's proposal. I love the idea of all of us being accessible at the same time. And I love the idea of like these traveling town halls. I think back to, this can be kind of an intimidating place for members of the public. We're up here, it's weird for us too, right? So I think, I just think back to when I was in college and I came to a city council meeting to speak, and I was like terrified. So if we can meet folks where they are in their own wards, like I think about like meeting at the fire station over in West Laramie and us all just like sitting together, like that feels more accessible from a community perspective, and so I'm really all for that.
Thank you, Councilor Vigil. I'm going to go to, is that what you were going to tell me? Well, I still have one too. City Manager, please.
So I thought maybe I'd offer a suggestion as I'm listening to your feedback. There's a lot of different types of public meetings, and sorry, I know I need to be closer. Sorry, people back there recording. Anyway, there's a lot of different ways to gauge public comment. There's actually like best practices around all the things you're talking about. So let me share with you what I think I'm hearing when I collate all of your thoughts about what your ideal meeting would look like together. I think what I hear you guys coming to is maybe we can call it whatever we want, but in sort of the lingo of engagement, I think what I feel like you're sort of swirling around is an open house. And I'll tell you, the reason I wanted to jump up, and thank you for letting me interject in your discussion here, but I'm thinking about like in all of the meetings, and I've been to about 1 million public meetings and forums and town halls and open houses and all those things. When I think about my experience in this community, we get open house participation at the highest rate of anything, right? And I think many of you were recently at the open house that Todd and the URA put together down at 4th Street, right? So I just pulled up like best practice stuff, right? This is the overall snapshot on an open house. It could be maybe kind of what Micah said, and I heard a few of you saying like we're all there in one place at one time, so you're easily accessible by the public, but they have the opportunity to walk around and speak and engage with you, right? There's a couple benefits to that, right? People come in here, and I think you being on the dais is maybe part of it, that imposing feeling, right? But some of it too is just people have to get up and speak in front of everybody else back here, right? And that's very intimidating for a lot of people. And they don't come, right? We see it every Tuesday night here, right? How many people come to work sessions? I think people in Laramie like to have one-on-one conversations, and that's why these open houses work. So here's kind of the best practice rundown. In terms of cost of planning and running and the staff resources required, they're moderate compared to other things, right? Expertise required is low, both from the public, from the elected officials, and for staff, because you're just having conversation with people. They can wander around, talk to people. Level of knowledge for the public is also low. Number of participants you can accommodate is many. Ability to reach a wide cross-section of the public, high, among the highest of all public meeting kind of types and sorts. The level of knowledge the public can take away from it, though, is also high, and the usefulness for you all and for city officials and gaining and acquiring that feedback you're looking for is pretty moderate. So I offer that as a suggestion based on kind of my own experience. The other thing I think it does is it honors people's time, because not only is it it's intimidating for many people to come up and say their piece in front of you guys, but also in front of a room of people behind them who may or may not agree. But it also, I just completely lost my train of thought. Oh, it respects their time in that if you guys are all accessible and they can just come up into a small group and talk to you, then maybe they get in and they're they're West Laramie and they want to come in and talk to Brandon about Wyoming Avenue, right? And they get in and they do it and they leave. And they don't have to sit through everybody else's comments. So I'm going to offer that as a concept. I'm not trying to steer you anyway. I'm just like hearing what you're saying. I feel like that's maybe what you're talking about. Maybe I'm wrong.
Thank you, City Manager. And Councilor Newman.
Any question? Do you have a phone tab? Because I've got so many calls on Wyoming Avenue lately, which is hilarious that you mentioned that. City Manager gave me an idea, and I think Vice Mayor at the same time. What if we have a mix? My first comment, if we meet here, I don't want to meet up here. I want to meet down there. Whether we put some tables a different way. So if we do have this work session, open meeting, town hall, whatever we call it, right? I don't want to meet up here. I do want to meet down there. But I think a hybrid of what city manager would work fantastically. First half an hour, maybe, we let them come up and talk to us. And then we have breakout sessions to where they can just come up and talk to us and we can mingle down there to where now there's a little bit of structure, but if you need that one-on-one or want that one-on-one, it's there as well. So.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. And I was thinking of mixing like 2 town hall, 2 open house. So, but I'm not married to anything. I think,
That's a good idea.
I'd like to just, Aaron. Councilor O'Doherty.
I like the way YDOT had their open house last week, because they laid the stuff on the table like we do for open houses for planning and stuff. People can come examine material, but then have a session where people, so that we're all hearing the same questions. So I'm not hearing from Sharon, look, my constituents all want X, and I haven't heard one person say that, and I just have to take her word for it. And I would, but I mean, but it can be the same couple loud constituents instead of a cross section. So if we're all hearing the thing, but yeah, the bit about being intimidated, public speaking is intimidating to a lot of people. But I have to also say, I was pretty much accosted at a university event with the mix where a guy was just right in my face screaming at me. I don't enjoy that. So I want a little buffer if somebody starts doing that. I want some help. But if I'm sitting there with 2 other counselors from my ward, then yeah, it'll be harder for somebody to just target me.
I appreciate all of the comments and your thoughtfulness and the expanse of your suggestions. You know that as my specialty is counseling, psych, mental health, I'm looking at communication, and we're trying to increase communication and engagement And I think, Councilor O'Doherty, you bring up a point that I really don't want to engage with the public secondhand, third hand, fourth hand. I don't want 3 counselors to go to a meeting and then try to tell me the relevancy of what happened. I think that I would like to see us, if we really want to communicate and engage, to be in the room together, experiencing that moment together, hearing it together, and not trying to get secondhand information or having people wonder, well, how come they're there and they're not? And I think to start dividing it up, it sounds efficient, but in the end, I think it dilutes it. I like the idea, this open house that WYODOT had, and Councilor Lockhart was there as well, I thought was extremely well done. They had informational materials, and they also did that at 4th Street, had informational materials where you kind of got some lowdown on stuff, and then everybody gathered, sat, there was a brief presentation, and then it was opened up for questions. And it was really well run. It was super informative, both of the sessions. And I would love to see something like that where we're all there together and communicating and approaching it in a holistic way toward engagement. And so that would be probably my preference. I love the idea of the traveling open house. And I love the idea of getting out of here where there's not 2 levels. And I think the MOC, the Lincoln Center, the Fire Station 3, there are a number of locations that could be interesting. And I think all 4, we should do all 4. I would prefer to do all 4 5th Tuesdays, even though it is such a delight to have a Tuesday off. But if we really want to do a year of seeing 4 times, how is this work? And then we can reevaluate. But to get it up and running where word gets out, hey, this was really interesting. I got to talk to all of them last night. You know, maybe the second one and the third each progressively get, you know, more participation and more improvement of the process. And regarding the money, I don't mind donating, but Councilor Newman and I have figured out a couple times that the effort that comes in from this council, we make around 30 to 40 cents an hour. So it helps. And I don't want to have an elitist council where only those with means can serve, and only those that don't have to struggle with childcare can, you know. So I think that it needs to be a choice, but I think sometimes that could be really important to one's stability, and that we want to have expectations where all people can participate. And those are my comments, and I'd open it to any follow-up comments. City Clerk first.
Mayor, you have Councilor Lockhart online.
All right, I'll do Councilor Lockhart, and then we'll go here. Councilor Lockhart, welcome, and we're ready for your comments. I think you're muted, Councilor Lockhart.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank
Hello?
you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I didn't mean any disrespect. Sounds like I rubbed some shoulders wrong. All I was saying is what I meant to get across is I would be happy to donate the money. Maybe I shouldn't say I didn't do it. I don't need the money. I didn't do this for the money is what I'm saying. So I'm happy to serve and give away the money. So if you took it the other way, I apologize, but that wasn't the intent. Second of all, I did like, Mayor, how you brought up the 4th Street project open house and how it was run. I thought it was, very informal yet informational. And I really liked, and it gives us a quarter each time to be able to come up with that information. If we can pick the agenda topics, then you can get those placards or poster boards or what have you made, so we have points of reference. So that was versus just sitting through a meeting with some handouts. That was, I love looking at it, and a lot of people were like, wow, I didn't know that. That's how this thing's going to go, or that's how that's going to go. So I do like that idea anyway. So if it was run like that, I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lockhart. And I'd like to clarify that my comments about salary, I had not picked up on what, I was not reacting or responding to you, but rather to a comment that the Vice Mayor made. And she explicitly just talked about salary. So I appreciate your sensitivity and offering that, but that was not intended toward you. And I don't think, all of us look surprised when you said that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, sir. And thank you for your comments about the 4th Street. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and also Councilor Lockhart. Yeah, I don't think none of us in the room took it that way, so no worries. I guess I'll just be brief. I think the city manager's idea of an open house type event, I fully support. I think figuring out an agenda, if we want specific items or not, is more complicated, so maybe we can spend more time here on that or think about that after the fact, but whether that means we're in our own areas and then we group up in small groups and then it's not an official meeting where pay is involved, I'd be in support of and see where that goes. And if we need to change it, obviously we can. But I like what Mayor Cumbie said about, going for a year and looking at what happens in those 4 meetings. But I'd like all of our options. I really like kind of an open house, open style forum. I think that's really nice.
Thank you, Councilor. And Councilor Newman.
Ditto. And then the traveling part, I think, is essential to what we are trying to do. I will say the difference between this and the 4th Street stuff, right? They had an agenda. And once again, if we want a topic and an agenda, that's a work session. So we have to be careful. But what I think we could do is put city surveys out and say, hey, what would you like to talk about at some of these things, right? Or maybe the first 2 meetings or the first meeting we say, hey, what would you like to talk about? To where then the second meeting we do have the informational boards to say, like, hey, we'll address this tonight, but if you come to the next meeting, let's get them back, right? And we'll have more that we can talk about. Then it's not necessarily a work session because they can still ask other questions, but we can say, hey, we're going to follow up. Maybe they'll come back and bring friends. So I want to make sure that we're not just sticking to those points, but I do like the survey or asking them at the first one and then going back. And then I have a feeling that's what our city manager was going to talk about. Oh, I just saw you get up, so that's all I have.
I just like to briefly say I love that idea that having the survey prior to the open house, and that it doesn't become the focus, but we can prepare materials, like what are your questions this time? And we could prepare some materials. About recycling. We could do, different educational pieces. Even if we didn't do a survey, rather than have a forced topic, we could provide education. Oh, I just had another idea, and I'm going to come out with it. Our boards and commissions have been charged with reaching out and doing programs with the community, and it could be a venue where it started with a board's presentation and then goes into our kind of working together. So there's a number of possibilities. City manager, I think you're next.
Let me just throw this in because, of course, I'm your best practices resource. The best practices say go to different parts of the community, go out and get in the community, get out of these chambers, right? It also says use that forum as an opportunity to share information about maybe the region you're in, make it topical, particularly for the space you're in. So and it says use it as a venue for sharing information, right? So people leave with something of value. They also have the opportunity to ask questions and express concerns and interests. So we have survey data, to your point. Of course, we already have our citizen survey that we do, so we could mine that for ideas. We could also do specific surveys, maybe in the quarter leading up to your Fifth Tuesday, saying, hey, we're going to be in West Laramie. I keep picking on West Laramie. We're going to be in West Laramie on this day. What topics do you want to talk about? And potentially could tailor that information as well. And I have to say, I love the idea of engaging our boards and commissions. We've really been trying the last 18 months to do that better and more effectively and give them a platform in the community where they can really talk about the work they do, because it's volunteer work and they get no cred for what they do. But what a great way to raise awareness about those volunteer opportunities and give credit where it's due back to those folks. So I will say at the very end of our Fifth Tuesday meetings, before we discontinued them, we were starting to explore that concept of sharing information. So in my office, we were like, oh, this big project, say 3rd Street's coming up. Let's send the council members with this. And we did that, I don't know, just a few meetings, but I felt like it was fairly well received. So we were maybe dancing around that at the end of them. And I'm standing up because I've been sitting. I am not kidding.
Oh, yes. Any final comments or? Thank you all for a very robust and informative and helpful
Mayor,
session. And yes, City Clerk.
could I just have the council summarize, what direction we're actually headed so that we can prepare a resolution to bring before you?
Correct me, but I believe that we have agreed that we want to go, that we like the city manager's suggestion and her support of her recognition of best practice in having open house. We would like to have that occur during the 4 Fifth Tuesdays at a different location in the city, so in different wards. We would like to start with some sort of a informative or educational presentation ready so people could mingle and read and ask questions, et cetera, and then go to more of a engagement, question, answer. So it would be the educational presentation, people mingling, looking at that, and council could mingle at the same time and take questions, and then we would sit and have an exchange of questions. There would be a time limit when you begin to comment, and I heard both a time limit for the person giving comment, and I really do think 5 minutes is enough. And anytime I was out there commenting before I got on council, it made me jot it down and come up with some bullet points so I could stay in that 3 minutes. And I will say that when I was out there talking to council, every time I came to the podium, I got a stomach ache. And then when I went down and rested, it would go away. So I would get so anxious. And Councilor Newman, did you want to add something?
I would like a time limit on the counselors.
I was about to add that.
Okay.
And the second thing I was going to add is that if counselors give a response, that we also try to maintain 3 minutes?
And if we need to, we'll just make a work session out of the topic, I think is the easiest.
Okay, if we need to go further, then we make note that that might be a possible work session. So that these responses from both, and I think the audience or the constituents would appreciate if they're limited to 3 minutes, then we do 3. And that if we can't answer it briefly, you're right, then we might suggest possibly this needs a lot more research, exploration, and we'll get, so there could be questions, and that's the challenge of answering questions on the fly. And that is that you don't have your research right there available. And, okay, yes, City
On
Clerk.
the discussion of limited time response, you said 5 minutes initially. Do you want it to 3 for the public and 3 for the council?
Is it 3-3 or 5-5?
I had 5.
5-5.
5, okay. 5 per person.
And that is a lot. I mean, sometimes when people begin, I'm surprised at how long 3 minutes is.
I wonder if we should,
4. 4? 4? 3 really gives more people an opportunity.
right. Can I talk?
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
I'm
I was waiting
sorry.
for you to call me.
I thought you were
No,
pointing fingers.
No, sorry.
I was trying to read how many minutes.
So I do like the 3 minutes, but could we put it in somehow, okay. Could we put it in somehow that we could allow them to keep going? Like it's not, let's say there's 4 people out there, right? And they get up and talk for 3 minutes. And maybe we know the information they're talking about. So 3 minutes to start with the possibility of council's approval to keep going. Like I don't want to like shoehorn them into 3 minutes if there's only 3 people or 4 people here. And instead of like, I'm sorry, but we should probably do a work session on this. We could just talk about it then, if that makes sense. So
It does make sense,
I don't know how to put that in writing though, so sorry, City.
but that we might go in rounds,
Oh, there you go. That's a good idea.
like we do here, that you speak the second time if everyone's had an opportunity and no one further wishes to speak. And that we just have some very simple rules, 3 minutes in rounds. I'm sorry, but let me go to Councilor Lockhart first, and then I'll come to you, Councilor Bowling.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
I can hear you well.
Okay,
Thank you.
fantastic. We're all kind of experimenting with this because we haven't done it for a while. So, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, I do like Councilor Newman's idea of giving them an extension, but then if you don't give someone else an extension, then they could be upset. So maybe we don't do that. Maybe we start out at 3 minutes, and then if it doesn't work, then we draft a new resolution saying, you know what, maybe 4 minutes or what have you. That way we know the limits. Otherwise, perhaps, you don't want to upset people because we accept someone else's, going past 3 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of ifs and ands and buts in that,
Yeah.
so I'm just trying to keep it clean.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you for
That's
your
all. Thank you.
comments. Councilor Bowling, and then Councilor O'Doherty.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've gotten into the weeds. And I think the city staff has gotten a lot of information from us, and it's probably in our best interest to let them try and synthesize this.
So let me ask City Clerk. You asked for clarification, and Councilor Bowling is suspecting we have gone overboard with that. Do you have enough?
I would defer to city manager on one thing. We've determined that we want Laramie, the citizens of Laramie. But from a staff perspective, do you have any questions about who you would need present or?
No, I'll assign staff as needed. I do have a question though about how long this thing is, and maybe I just missed it. Are we talking like 2 hours, like 1
No,
hour?
I would say an hour and a half, 90 minutes.
Okay, so maybe if it's an hour and a half, we do like 45 minutes of the kind of open, mill around, get information, talk to people, and then 45 minutes, sit down, take comment? Okay, if I missed that, I apologize.
And Counselor O'Doherty,
I go to a lot of meetings where, depending on the size of the crowd and how many people want to speak, we say, I move that we, keep the comments to 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And since we do hear a lot of complaints sometimes when people are trying to tell us something important, they've done the research, and they get up there and they run out of time, I would like to say 5 minutes, just say that it's going to be 3 to 5 minutes depending on crowd size. Like if you get there and you see that there are 400 people and you say, how many people want to speak? And they all raise their hand, then you're going to say, okay, we're going to have to limit to 3 minutes. So I think that could be depending on how many people are there.
I like that.
Does the council generally want to go that direction then? Okay, so 3 to 5 minutes. Okay, with that, Mayor, I think we have enough to go ahead and draft up a resolution unless there's anything additional that the council feels like we haven't determined, but.
Is there anything additional? Thank you so much for all your input and helping kind of mold that together. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none. Oh, I see someone coming. Yes. If you can state your name for the record, Chris.
Christopher Stratton, Laramie 24/7. Coming on the aspect of a public forum end, I would suggest to council that maybe one of these do be held here and it televised as well so that you have access to those who can't come to council meetings. You have the Zoom options here, and it would just be a really good section where it shows the public comments, etc., that would be available on Zoom, or available on the TV and available on YouTube. That's my comments for today.
Chris, are you implying that it's not possible to broadcast it from other locations?
If we brought the equipment to do so, as we've had problems with the other locations, it would be, we would have to bring camera equipment to make it where this has everything available. So if you could do like one a year here, then it would be probably an easier setup and open to the community and work around with that.
Well, thank you
We
for
can
your
definitely-
suggestion.
Not a problem. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. We have no other public comments online. All righty. Then we can move on to our last work session, Open Meetings and Public Records Acts. Let's do a 4-minute, 5-minute break. 5 minutes.
and Council. So this next work session is the annual Open Meetings and Public Records Act training that we provide to all of our boards and commissions once a year. And part of that is, as you know, you appoint members several times throughout the year to replace members that have termed out or have resigned. And so we almost always have new members on the boards and commissions. So we want to make sure that everybody's up to speed. Before we get started, I'm just curious, how many of you have heard this presentation once this year?
Oh, this year?
Yeah. How many have heard it twice?
Oh, not this year.
How many have heard it 0 times this year? Okay, so we have 4 members that have not heard it yet this year. And Matt Lockhart is also raising his hand, so 5 that have not heard it yet this year. So it's probably a good thing to go ahead and do the presentation for you. So if you have questions as we're going through the slides, feel free to stop me and ask your questions. If you've heard it before, sorry, Will.
I'm just stretching my back.
Yeah. I usually try to keep this presentation to 20-25 minutes, but then boards and commission members oftentimes have questions that they interject as we go through, so some of them take a little bit longer, just depending upon the questions that we have. So the first thing that we give them is the City of Laramie mission, vision, and core values. Part of why we share this with them is just make sure that they understand what city staff are working from, so that we can also communicate that to them and ask them to please use the same core values that we're using, which include respect, integrity, teamwork, and stewardship. So we want to respect our team members as a whole. We can disagree, but we can still respect each other and show each other, some decency as we disagree. So let's see. Oh, it just, I just had to click on it once on the computer screen.
Do your stuff if you need.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So roles and responsibilities is something that we've added this year for all of our presentations. And the purpose of that is to make sure that each of the boards and commissions just to remind them why they've been created by the City Council, whether it's to meet a state statute that's been set out, like Planning Commission, that's part of why they exist. Civil Service Commission is the same thing. And then you have your recommending bodies like Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities, Human Rights and Relations Commission. Not that they're any less important, but we want to make sure that they know what they've been created for so that they can stay within the scope of their duties and responsibilities. So, City Council, of course, is created based off from state statutes. So it gives us a layout of what you're responsible for. And I gave you a few things in this slide. Of course, there are many more. If you've gone to Wyoming Statute 15.1.103, it gives you a whole list that just continues for pages. So if you haven't reviewed that, you might want to go check it out. It includes purchase and holding real property, sell and convey and lease any estate-owned, control finances, take necessary action to plan, construct, or otherwise improve, modify, repair, maintain, and regulate the use of streets, to license, tax, and regulate any business conducted or trafficked within city limits. So, of course, like I said, there are many other things in that statute. A chair has been selected to run the meetings. So in this case, we've elected our mayor, Sharon Cumby, and we have a vice mayor. The vice mayor acts in place of the mayor in her absence. So the mayor also is responsible for making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. It's important that we don't leave the opposing view out, and so everyone has that opportunity to speak. So the next slide here is council members. And I just included your rate of pay here. For our boards and commission members, they are all uncompensated positions. Part of that is statutorily required when it comes to like Civil Service Commission. It specifically states that they are uncompensated positions. So it kind of remains that way across all the boards and commissions. For you, your pay rate is set within municipal code. So it does take an ordinance change with 3 readings in order to change that. We always thank our boards and commission members for their service. As you know, being on council, reviewing agenda materials, coming to the meetings, takes a lot of time and effort. And so we do want to thank them always for their service to the community, as well as you as counselors. Yes, you ran for this office, but most of the time you didn't understand the scope of what you agreed to. So we do really appreciate you serving the community, because it's important to get the business done of the city and to be able to continue to provide those services to our community that are necessary. So thank you all for all that you do. We do encourage that all members provide or display professionalism, appropriate demeanor, and exercise sound judgment. So again, we can have disagreements on our boards and commissions and city council, but if we just ask that you be professional in how you deal with that. Agendas, of course, you know, are put together by the city clerk's office, but in conjunction with the city manager and the management team. They draft the materials, or we draft the materials and place that together on the agenda. We also, in the clerk's office, maintain the minutes of the meetings. We provide your legal notices, and we archive the meeting recordings. So, of course, occasionally we have failures of equipment, but we try to record every meeting and make that available to the public. So it doesn't happen very often, but we have had sound equipment failures and things like that. So it does happen occasionally, but we do keep attendance records. Part of that is to meet your requirements within your rules of procedure. And so we do have those in our office. We facilitate the routing of questions and comments that might come into our office for you from the public. So as you saw last week, we had a letter delivered to the office for you. And so it's our job in the city clerk's office to make sure that you receive that information. So we kind of work as that in between. Records of the votes of the council, of course, are contained within your minutes, which is part of what we're responsible for. That is a state statute requirement. And so we do make sure that we keep minutes of all of the meetings. Whether the recording fails or not, the minutes are a have to. So we do keep those. Those are permanent records. In case you're ever curious about records retention, which we'll talk more about as we get into this, but they do stick around forever now. Voting may occur only at regular or special meetings. Decisions will be made by the majority vote of the members unless it's otherwise called for. So occasionally you'll make a motion that requires a 2/3 vote. Then of course we would go with that. But a majority of the 9 is 5. We mention this for the boards and commission members too, because sometimes they haven't served in a board capacity before. So it's just important to make sure they know what a quorum is. So the board speaks as one. This slide is really important to communicate with our boards and commission members and to our counselors. When you make a motion and you vote on it, the board has spoken on that item. So we want to make sure that they understand it's inappropriate for them to say, the Board of Health has decided that we're going to do X, Y, Z, without the board actually meeting and discussing that and taking a vote on that item. So they would need to represent themselves in that capacity and say, it's my opinion, you know, that we need to do X, Y, Z. So we just try to make that distinction between the two. Mayor?
Oh, sorry. Councilor Newman.
This has been brought up, so I wanted to discuss it real fast. Is this why we don't let boards come and present information when city staff has already done this? So like traffic studies, for example, is one that we hear a lot about. Is that why we don't let one member of that board come and present information to us?
In some instances, that is what we're trying to prevent is, one member of a body that is super passionate, and we are appreciative of their passion. But rather than getting that one voice, making sure that it's something that the collective body has decided on, to present that to you, if that makes sense.
I would just add too, that's part of staff's responsibility. For instance, when you have a planning commission recommendation, the staff will present that to you as well. And of course, they're trained to distill that and most of the time present it in a cogent and as short a possible way. As you know, your board and commission members will occasionally come and want to present to or speak to, and oftentimes they were in the minority vote of the board and commission action. So the thing that you can know staff will do is they're going to present the majority's vote, but those individuals are certainly welcome to come as citizens, right, and talk to you about why they disagree or feel differently.
There is a process in place through the city manager's office as well that they could request a joint work session if, let's just say, since we're using them as an example, the Board of Health could pass a resolution saying that they would like to request a joint work session on a specific topic with the city council, and so that is something that we haven't seen used often and stuff, but it is kind of there.
Please continue.
Okay. So this next slide just talks about the Open Meetings Act. It's found in 164401, and it states the agencies of Wyoming exist to conduct public business. Certain deliberations and actions shall be taken openly in a as provided in this act. So that's just kind of summarizing that. It helps to protect you and the city of Laramie from liability by adhering to proper conduct and procedures, and it increases transparency. Both the Open Meetings Act and the Public Records Act were created to provide that transparency so the public are allowed to be here when you're making decisions for public business. So whether that's it states that they have to be able to participate contemporaneously. So they don't have to be present in order for you to have a meeting, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. But they are welcome to join, and we do make them available to the public. So the next slide just gives you a few definitions here. Agency just talks about what's included. Boards and commissions are included in that. Of course, you are the governing body for the city of Laramie, so you're included as an agency. Meetings is an assembly of at least a quorum of the governing body of an agency, which has been called by proper authority of the agency for the express purpose of discussion, deliberation, presentation of information, or taking action regarding public business. So assembly is the next definition, which means communication in person by means of telephone or electronic communication or in any other manner such that all participating members are able to communicate with each other contemporaneously. So that's just kind of important to keep in mind there, since telephone is also mentioned in there. So we just gave you a couple more references here. In 164403, it says in A, that all meetings of a governing body of an agency are public meetings open to the public at all times except as otherwise provided. No action of a governing body of an agency shall be taken except during a public meeting following notice of the meeting in compliance with this act. Action taken at a meeting not in conformity with this act is null and void and not merely voidable. So if action was taken outside of a called meeting, it's as if it never happened. So you have to start over from ground zero, basically, so. Let's see. 16.4.404 talks about how we can notice meetings. So you can adopt an ordinance, a resolution, bylaws, or a rule for holding your regular meetings. That's why at the first meeting in January now you see a resolution setting the meeting date, time, and place. We use that to communicate as one of our communication tools to the public to make sure that they've been noticed yearly on when our regular meetings shall be held. So our regular business meetings and our work sessions are all included in that notice. So we do send that resolution to the paper for publication after you pass it. There is a provision in here that if you don't, pass an ordinance resolution, they can also write and request to be placed on a list to be notified when a meeting is being held, and that must be renewed annually in writing. We don't have very many requests, or at least not in the clerk's office, for notifications. The public does have that Notify Me tool that they can use. They can sign up to get notifications through our website when new agendas have been published, and things to that nature, when news flashes go out and things like that. So a lot of them, I think, are using that as a tool, or they just go and check it out themselves. So feel free to continue to share those options with the public. So this is kind of what we were talking about with the public. In 16.4.403, a member of the public is not required to register his name or to supply information to complete a questionnaire or fulfill any other condition precedent to his attendance. A person seeking recognition at the meeting may be required to give his name and affiliation. And in 16.4.403C, minutes of the proceedings are kept. So a member of the public is not required to be in attendance for you to hold the meeting. We cannot require somebody to register their name in order to attend. So I know there's been some question brought up before if Zoom violates that. We have had screen names from all different kinds of things. So they don't actually have to provide their real name and stuff to participate on Zoom. So it's been determined that that's not a violation, to my understanding. So when they come into the meeting, we don't make them sign in, none of that. But if they do want to provide public comment, it is appropriate to ask them for their name and affiliation for the record. So like the mayor does, can you please state your name for the record? A lot of people will give you their address, or if they're with a business, a lot of times they'll say, I'm here representing, ABC company.
Yes. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. So I know I saw this a few times last year where people wouldn't give their name. Can the mayor say we don't accept the comment at this time? I mean, it seems very, I don't know if we would ever do that, but is that kind of a gray area in this?
Oh, well, that's a great question, because it's not stated in your rules of procedure that they have to provide their name. So Bob Southard actually has his hand raised. Mayor, do you mind if we go to Bob?
Excuse me.
Let me see if I can turn on my camera. Yes, you can refuse to take a comment for someone who doesn't give their name and affiliation. I mean, last year or the year before, we had Nazis show up without their real name and lying, obviously, about their affiliation, and you can cut off those comments.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so in 16.4.403D, no meeting shall be conducted by electronic means or in any form of communication that does not permit the public to hear, read, or otherwise discern meeting discussion contemporaneously. Discussions outside a meeting, included but not limited to sequential communications among members of an agency, shall not be used to circumvent the purpose of this act. The AG's office has ruled that a series of emails falls under the definition of sequential communications. So it's important to remember emails, text messages, all of that is considered electronic means. And so if I send the mayor an email about an ordinance that's coming up, I've just created an official record, you know, and stuff. It's just important things to kind of keep in mind. That's why we recommend that you not reply all to email communications, because we don't want to start an email chain of communication about public business because the public aren't able to be there to hear what our discussion is. So we can like email back and forth like, hey, are you able to attend a meeting on this day? You know, that's fine, but we don't want to start having conversations about, hey, we want to vote no on item 10D on the agenda, you know, things like that we don't want to have via email. Any questions on that?
You and I had a discussion today about, you know, that sequential contact. And what we talked about is if that contact is about business, about, you know, how we're going to do the business, what the end result will be, well, then that's problematic. But if it's, and it's really hard to split it, but if it's about process, then if we need to talk to each other, can you tell me about the process, how this works, then that would be okay. But this is really talking about the business of the city. Is there a way to, it's sometimes I think that we overdo this to a point, and of inhibiting process. So we're so concerned that we'll discuss the content that sometimes we avoid engaging in the process, going to the president's reception next week. I mean, we take it to a point where we think 4 of us, 5 of us can't be in the same room when we can, but we cannot discuss and conduct business. And it's just so hard to draw that line and to recognize if we cross it.
Bob might have some recommendations for us, but when it comes to attending an outside community event, you know, that's okay to do. As you stated, Mayor, if you're talking city business and you're making decisions outside of a called meeting, that's when we could be in violation of the state statute.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
It does. Thank you.
And if you're ever uncomfortable, you can always remove, one of you could remove yourselves, you know, and stuff. But if you're all attending a wedding or a funeral, you don't have to have a called meeting to go to those services, you know, so. We've kind of already talked about the definition of meeting, so we don't have to go over this again, but it is for the purpose of discussion, deliberation, presentation of information, or taking action regarding public business. So action is defined as a collective decision of the board, collective commitment or promise by the board to make a positive or negative decision, or an actual vote of the board upon a motion, proposal, resolution, regulation, rule, order, or ordinance at a meeting. So we put this slide in there always, not to scare anybody away, but more to inform everybody that if we purposely violate these state statutes, we can be held liable for a fine of up to $750. So it's important to just make sure that we know that that exists. And if we are in a meeting that has not been properly called, and stuff, we can remove ourselves from the meeting and have that stated in the minutes and stuff. So any questions on that? So the next slide is conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest can be tricky to determine, do I actually have a conflict of interest? Is it a perceived conflict of interest? Should I recuse myself or not? So there's a couple of questions here that you could ask to try to help determine whether or not you have a conflict of interest. If it appears like you might have impropriety, we have had a few counselors over the years. Some of you may have been on council or seen the meetings where they did not officially maybe have a conflict, but it appeared like they did, so they recused themselves from that item specifically. But if you're going to have a financial gain over the decision that's being made, or you are benefited more than anybody else generally would be, there may be a conflict there that you might want to address. So if you were to recuse yourself, you would state that most of the time with council, they state it during disclosures. And then again at the item, when the item comes up, they do recuse themselves. In Planning Commission, I have seen a few members fully remove themselves from the room for that item, and that's so they don't influence the decision that's being made. They don't offer any or, like facial expressions that might change the vote of their fellow members. Let's see, we'll go on to the next slide. So disclosures and ex parte communications. We added this in a couple years ago with a little bit more explanation because we were receiving a lot of questions about what disclosures are. So if you have information that everyone else doesn't have, but it could affect your decision that's on an item before you, it could be important to disclose that information to the rest of the board because then it could be something that influences their decision as well. If you had a final decision before you, like Planning Commission, for instance, they are the final vote on some of their like variances that come before them. If an applicant calls them and wants to meet with them outside of the meeting and has further communications and things like that, they probably want to disclose that ex parte communication, and it may not be right to even do that, go and have that meeting with them. But you do want to disclose that kind of stuff. You guys have kind of done that already, and so if you have any questions about that, we're happy to discuss that further. So if you're acting within the scope of your duties, that you are generally probably covered underneath of the City of Laramie Legal Counsel. If you're acting outside of the scope of your duties, then you are likely going to erode your immunity. So it's really important for our boards and commission members, as well as our city council, to know what you're responsible to do and what duties you should be acting on. And that way we don't have traffic commission members taking action on something that the Board of Health would review, just things like that. So Our chair is responsible for helping to make sure that all of our conversation stays germane to the topic at hand. So if we are going awry on a topic, our chair is responsible for kind of reining us back in and saying, okay, I think we're getting a little off topic, let's bring it back. So. Public records. So, as you know, all of our boards and commission members have now received City of Laramie email addresses. We did that because of that written communication that we already kind of talked about. It becomes a public record. And so we have to meet state retention for records, and each record has a different retention schedule. It gets a little tricky and stuff, and when they were all using their own email addresses, it's really hard to maintain those records because we're not actually in receipt of any of those records typically, so, or limited amounts of those. So we've given it to them for that, but also for public communication. It helps the public to be able to communicate with the boards and commission members a little bit easier. So just to let you know that they all do have those now. We recommend that they don't delete emails generally. That's my recommendation anyways, if they're not sure, because we don't want to purposely violate, the Public Records Act and stuff. So they could form a folder that says 2025 and just dump it in there, so it's not cluttering their inbox and stuff. But let's see. So the Open Meetings and Public Records Acts exist to provide transparency through integrity, accountability, credibility, confidence, and public trust. So these were originally put into place to make sure that the public have the opportunity to be involved in the public process, to hear how decisions are made, Parliamentary procedure, as you all know, for us, we have the rules of procedure put in place. Those take precedence. They are the top tier that we go to first for running our meetings. If there is a rule that is not in our rules of procedure, then we defer to the Roberts Rules of Order in the newly revised edition. So Robert's Rules of Order is used to facilitate the meetings and help them stay organized. Agendas, of course, help us to keep the order of the business. And we ask that all remarks go through the chair. We also remind the boards and commissions of that because it's so easy to get into a situation where you're talking over each other and then nobody knows what's going on. Or, it could end up just in a poor situation where someone doesn't get the opportunity to speak during the meeting. So it's really important to make sure that we go through the mayor so we can maintain that structure. Making a motion. Motions are used to introduce business to the meeting. The chair can bring an item to the floor by reading the title. So that is another way that items are brought to the floor. So for discussion items, for instance, during a work session, the mayor may say, okay, our next topic on the agenda is the Open Meetings and Public Records Act presentation, and that brings that to the floor. Before you deliberate on the item, you do need that motion on the floor. So we know what the discussion is. Are we approving? Are we denying? Are we, amending? A motion typically requires a second. And then we do ask the chairs if they would state the motion maker the second and briefly what the motion was. And again, that just kind of brings it to the table for discussion. If an amendment is made to a motion, we do address the vote on the amendment before we go back to the main motion. And the purpose for that is the amendment then becomes part of the main motion. And you can amend a motion twice or amend an amendment twice. So we have gotten a few really complicated amendments over time and stuff, but Ryan and I serve as the parliamentarians for the city of Laramie. As city clerk, I have put myself, but also asked Ryan to go through the parliamentary procedure training. Of course, we are always learning new things and stuff too, but we have done a class to try to be able to provide you with the best service that we can, and hopefully be up to speed on what your rules are, what Robert's Rules of Order say, and stuff, so that we can help you conduct the meeting in a well-run meeting. So. The next few slides we're not going to go through unless you would like to, but what I've done in the next few slides is just to give you some most commonly used motions. So motions to amend, postpone, things like that. In here, it also states like what pages you might be able to find it in some of the rules of procedure books, or Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised editions. Of course, that changes from edition to edition, so hopefully I've been able to stay up to date on that. But one thing I wanted to point out for you are these last couple slides, and I think all of you have received a little cheat card that gives you different types of motions. I like these because it helps to keep all of us informed on what's required. If a motion's required, if it's debatable, if it's a non-debatable motion like tabling the item last week, that is a non-debatable item, which means that the council cannot discuss whether we're tabling or not. You just go straight to the vote. Whereas a postponement is debatable because you can amend the postponement and change the date that it's been amended to. So they are slightly different in nature, which I think these cards become super handy for. So if you didn't get one, please let me know and we'll make sure you have one. You don't have. Okay, all right, I'll make sure that you guys get, yeah. Okay, okay, sounds good. And with that, Mayor, we put the mission and vision statement back on the end of the presentation just because we think it's important that we're all on the same page. So if the council have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Bob is still with us as well, so.
No, he had to sign off.
Okay, all right.
He texted me and the vice mayor.
Okay. So if we have any legal questions later, we can always email Bob or call him and ask him opinions about conflicts of interest, or if there's a question about meeting quorum, I can help to a certain level, and then if it's beyond me, we can absolutely refer to the city attorney. So.
Okay. Thank you, City Clerk.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. Are there any questions? We have none. So I always learn something when we go through that. Is there any public comment on that agenda item? Seeing none in the room, is there any online? No, none online. We will move on to City Council updates. I'll start with Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. My update is that last week I attended the Police Advisory Board meeting. We, among a number of things, including this presentation from Nancy, which was very well done, thank you. The board reviewed the council's goals and objectives and for alignment with their 2024 goals and objectives, and then decided that those 2024 goals would remain for 2025. We had a short discussion about op-ed about the trafficking presentation that was presented a few weeks ago in our work session. And then we did a rather in-depth presentation on principles for reducing custody in deaths in custody. I think the largest reflection from that, again, in my opinion, is the level of training that our officers are provided versus other officers around the country, and the care and that goes into that training to give them all the critical thinking skills necessary to try and make the decisions, split-second decisions that are going to cause the least amount of harm while also maintaining public safety. So that was pretty excellent. And if I missed anything, City Manager, please. The only other thing I'll say is that I sent a volunteer email about some activities coming up at the Laramie Rifle Range. I'll attend that meeting tomorrow, so I'll report back with some more details on times, what you might want to wear if you're going to show up. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lockhart, since he's in the middle between you, do you have anything to report?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Last night I had a planning commission meeting, which was probably one of the shortest meetings I've been to since I became a counselor. We just had one topic, and it was the new subdivision over there on 9th Street and Boswell. It's called the Spring Creek Village. It's right across from the storage unit, and it was the final plat. And it was pretty interesting. This is for the final plat for 24 residential lots, but there's going to be quite a few more. This was just for those 24, and there might be some commercial that goes in there too. So very interesting. And I've been seeing that go up, almost daily anyway. So just because of, where I go during the day with my business. But anyway, so that's going to go on. So we need homes. So that's a great opportunity over there. Something I didn't realize, and I had heard it before, but the water table is very high over there. So there's no basements in these homes. They're all going to be just a slab instead of having a basement due to the high water table. So I had heard it, but never heard it officially. So then I also had to Zoom and I believe, Mayor, you went to the meeting, the Albany County Housing Coalition meeting yesterday at noon. Unfortunately, on Zoom, they shut off your volume when you break into groups. So I really didn't get to learn anything. And so I'm going to have to maybe reach out with you and chat with you and a couple other people that are on my when we break up into groups in my group to find out what was discussed, because it pretty much told me to never do Zoom on that meeting again. So anyway, but I was very interested in the planning commission meeting, just because all we talk about, or a majority of the talk we talk about, is housing. It's a big concern, and looks like that's a good start over there. And that's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just two quick updates. So for the Laramie Public Art Coalition, I am still filling in the interim for Councilor Bowling. Their March meeting, which was supposed to be today, was canceled because they're right in the middle of the search process for their next executive director, which is super exciting. And so there will be 2 finalists this week, kind of doing some public engagement stuff. And so I am not on that search committee. But there will be opportunities to meet the candidates this week. And then for Laramie Town Gown, we have a meeting. It's more of a planning meeting on Thursday. And so that meeting will be to discuss the more public, like community engagement type meeting for April 10th. And so, yeah, more to come on that.
Thank you. Councilor Doherty.
Attended the Laramie Advisory Commission on Disabilities. Unfortunately, we didn't have a quorum, but we did learn that this is still Disability Awareness Month, and that the commission had a booth at the Luau at the rec center, and it was well attended. Lots of people talking about disabilities, and then and they were hoping to that's yeah, that's something they have to vote on, so never mind. And then I went to the beautification committee for Councilor Richardson, so she didn't have to drive back here and then drive back to Denver last week or whenever that was. And there was a presentation about the skate park, and so a beautification project there. And Josh Kiefer is asked for the beautification committee for $2,000 to help with this. And the mural, they hope to put a mural on the vertical wall.
Oh, nice.
But they have to do a lot of other things first, and the beautification committee approved that. And then the other thing was the 3rd Street project, but it sounds like our mayor has a lot more notes. But, I want to say the one thing I didn't like about that format is that a lot of people were speaking at once when it was supposed to be, and so then somebody's trying to talk, but somebody just keeps chiming in, and somebody else keeps chiming in, like criticizing or putting their opinion about what everybody was saying all at the same time. So I'm so used to order that I just was like, somebody needs to take control of the meeting. So I hope that we have some facilitation at ours. Thanks.
Okay. I'll go ahead and, on the 26th of February, attended LCBA board for Councilor Newman, and they asked if I had any report, and I wasn't prepared to give a report, so I, of course, reported on something I know very well, the Housing Coalition, and went on for my 5 minutes. And they looked at market sector updates, and they're interested in looking at the off-track betting and surveying the community for their opinion on that, as we have expanded a bit, and they want to get a sense of the community before, that continues. They talked about the Career Expo coming up March 27th at the Albany County Fairgrounds. Then on the 27th, attended state legislative luncheon with sponsored by WHAM. The Vice Mayor was there, Councilor O'Doherty, and Director Wade. And the highlight of that moment was watching Director Wade and our state treasurer engage in conversation about finance and accounting. It was amazing. And she held her own, and I had to lean over and tell him, you cannot have her. That evening, we had the town hall. I only have, I gave you all a card for Andrea for the contact. If anyone needs help or has questions, she said just have them call her and she will get them to the right place. They also stated that the plan is to complete the construction by mid-September, and like with the Curtis Street Bridge, they have provided an incentive for early completion, and it's, I forget the amount, but it's substantial incentive, and they will be closing down construction by the 4th of July through Jubilee days. So they'll be kind of clearing things out for that, and then they hope that they'd be ready to start paving after that. Councilor O'Doherty and I attended Finance Committee, and we continue to ask lots of questions, but we're learning to read the budget a little better. And I just want to make a statement that I am amazed at the cost of electricity, and I am heartbroken that the limit it has not expanded from 25 to 200. I think that's very sad, because that could have reduced our electric bill significantly, but we will try again next year and get that information out maybe about how much we could save on the total expenses if we had that. 310, the Albany County Housing Coalition, and Councilor Lockhart, I'm sorry you weren't able to get in with the Zoom. We're working in our work groups to kind of dive deeper into the framework that we're working with and see, now that we've been working together, how does that apply? And so it's a very interesting group of people. There's 35, Janine, when you say about 35 people in attendance at least, there are 80 people now on the email that have the potential to attend, and there are people from every walk of life that are attending those meetings. So we're getting representation, contractors, developers, landlords, banks, everything, real estate people, advocates, city, county. So it's very robust and very vibrant, and that is it. It's been a busy couple of weeks. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I attended the Main Street meeting. It's a little bit more of a quiet time for them right now, but they are gearing up for the Flavor Fest, the International Flavor Fest, which is going to be April 8th through the 12th downtown. And they have also been doing a lot of work to communicate with businesses about the closures of the street and communicate or have been in conversations with city staff about an upcoming work I think it'll be a voting meeting to talk about snow removal downtown. And so there has been a lot of good discussion between city and Main Street. Most of my meetings are next week. And thank you, Councilor O'Doherty, for attending beautification for me. That was really helpful.
Councilor Newman.
No updates.
Thank you. Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I missed the last work session, and I forgot to send what I had been working on, so I'll try to be brief. But these go back to 212 and 213, so February. Park Trees and Rec Board met, and we talked about the biggest topic that I have in my notes is See My Legacy that Director Bork talked about with us recently, and the initiative there to support our communities in different ways. And then they talked about the I guess the event that happened, the luau that happened in the rec center, so that was a big topic for the Park Trees and Rec Board, or Advisory Committee. Event, yeah, pardon me, sorry. It was a luau, the city-sponsored event that Council Member O'Doherty talked about. And then on 213, got to meet with the Railroad Depot Board. The biggest thing that we talked about there is some of the updates and some of the fixes and restoration projects that they have. Painting one of the rail cars that's in there is a big topic, and I think they're going to get some funding from a couple other Laramie organizations. They have a group of folks that are really dedicated and interested in doing that work, volunteering that work, and they've talked about having a gala, like a 1920s gala to celebrate. I can't remember how many years in front of me, but there's going to be a gala to celebrate like 1920s, I think, when that depot was created. Wow. So I'll get more information tomorrow when I meet with them again. The Traffic Safety Commission also met on 213, and the biggest thing we talked about was implementing sharrows, which are like a little bike person with two chevrons to dedicate shared usage. And so I think there will be quite a bit of sharrows going in certain areas, and there's a map. It's really cool. But just to provide more context, we talked about priorities for certain streets to have these that are big thoroughfares and high use areas, just to delineate where bikers could be and to let automobiles know that. There's also two folks that have I think are interested in working on the Traffic Safety Commission, and so there will be some interviews that are being scheduled by Cindy Sanchez, and so we'll be maybe adding some folks to the Traffic Safety Commission here soon. And the last update I have is from the Ranch Advisory Board, or Advisory Committee. We met for the first time this year on February 13th. Some awesome presentations. There's an outgoing livestock lease, a ranch lease, Bear Livestock, who's, I think, been working with the city for quite a few years. They had a presentation about what they've been doing and getting the property up to speed to have someone else take over or leave it as, better than they found it. And there's also there's a big talk about solar. There's been some talk about having some solar installations on this property. And since it was the first meeting, there was a lot of folks attending, and we had a lot of questions about the efficacy of that or what that looks like. And so we're having a special meeting in April before our May meeting to talk about conservation easements and what solar would look like on the property for the city, for our community, and some of those things. So I have 3 meetings again tomorrow, or 1 meeting tomorrow, and then 2 on Thursday. So I'll be able to report back at our next work session.
Thank you very much. And if we can right now take a look at the agenda, and if you'll start with the consent agenda, if there are any items of concern to you. And if you'll give me a nod when you're finished.
Mayor, if I could just let you know, Director Bork did submit his item today for the Parks, Tree, and Rec meeting minutes as 1 item versus 3 separate items. So on your consent agenda, you'll see 1 item for the combined 3 minutes.
Thank you for that clarification, City Clerk. Moving on to regular agenda. Is there any concerns or questions? All right.
Sorry, I have one quick question.
Oh, yes.
And this will probably come to me as we're talking about it, but City Clerk, the piece that you're putting together for the 5th Tuesdays, will that won't be in this meeting, it will be in the following one to have it in time for 5th? Would you just clarify that?
Yeah, I think in order to have enough time to adequately put it together and have the attorney be able to look at it as well, the April 1st meeting would be better.
April 1st, great, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Councilor Newman?
City Clerk, can I talk about item 11 and the plan with that? With the email that we talked about?
I can give you an update. You'll be given a motion to postpone on that item. The question is the date that you would want to postpone to, and Nancy sent that around today. Your work session is the 18th?
22nd.
The 22nd.
22nd,
April
sorry. I knew I had
22nd.
that date wrong. So you certainly want to postpone it for some time after that, I would suggest.
Yeah, based off from the discussion in the work session might determine how long you need to, in order for that to come back to the council. So I think postponing to a date certain except after the April 22nd work session is, yeah, probably the
Just
best
so
way
you
to
guys
go.
were aware that it was going to get postponed right away.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for clarifying that, Councilor Newman. And that then ends this rather robust meeting. We are adjourned.
Thank you.